right, Frank, thank you so much. It is back to in-person learning for students in 13 regions across the province next week, including Durham, Halton, and Hamilton. But students in COVID hotspots like Toronto, York, and Peel going to have to wait until the following week. So there are a lot of questions when it comes to the what's next. For the answers, Education Minister Stephen Lecce joining me now live. Good morning to you, Minister.
Good morning, Melanie. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining. All right, so let's begin with the tangibles, because everyone has questions about these enhanced safety measures. We're hearing some great talk about the ventilation systems, the class sizing, the asymptomatic testing. So let's go through them one by one, because
Sure.
I want to hear some specifics. So we're getting a lot of questions here. So let's begin with the ventilation system and improving that. Let's say we have some school boards who are going back come Monday. Have all of those ventilation systems already been improved?
100% of, nearly 100% of all schools in the province of Ontario have been reviewed by the school board. 96% of them have reported improvements to air ventilation systems. 20,000 HEPA filters, which are the highest level air quality systems, have been inserted into our schools, into our HVAC systems, and 23,000 portable HEPA units have been procured for, let's say, portables and sort of smaller classes to improve the airflow. So we've made profound improvements in schools, and we've added another $50 million just this week to support even more air improvements, because we recognize it's vital to the safety of children and staff.
Minister, what's going to be happening for the hotspots in the next week and change before they go back on the 16th when it comes to potentially looking again, evaluating those ventilation systems, maybe evaluating some of the classroom setups? Is anything going to physically change in these schools in the next week for Toronto, Peel, and York?
Yeah, the three school boards, or rather the school boards within those respective regions, have said they'll take the time to continue to improve the environments within our schools. Obviously, we've taken action, provided funding for them to do that. We recognize that school boards are working with local public health. Toronto Public Health said as recently as yesterday, Dr. Davila, they've hired additional staffing to support our schools, 200 staff now dedicated specifically within public health to the support and safety of our children. So there's a great partnership happening. There's actions happening within our schools to really make them safer spaces for kids. And as Toronto District School Board said yesterday, they are ready to reopen.
Minister, we heard from Dr. David Williams, Ontario's top doctor, saying that there's no COVID transmission in schools and that these are safe places. But then when we use a place like Thorncliffe Park Public School, where we saw the asymptomatic testing and seeing a number of cases there, is that fair to make that connection and see that correlation that there wasn't any spread within schools? And should parents and educators feel safe?
Well, what the Chief Medical Officer of Health said is that over 90% of cases within our schools came from the community, which demonstrate, Melanie, that the layers of protection, the program we put in place supported by the Chief Medical Officer of Health, actually helped to deter the spread of COVID within schools. We did asymptomatic testing in the 4 hotspots in November and December at the peak of transmission in 2020. What did the results say? In the toughest communities with the highest rates of positivity, like Thorncliffe Park, we saw overall of that program, 9,000 tests, students had a 1.8% positivity rate. The staff had a 1% positivity rate. Those are in the highest levels of transmission. We found we did not see asymptomatic spread as was purported it may be. That should give confidence that when we tested in those very schools in the hearts of those communities challenged by COVID, we didn't see asymptomatic spread. The data speaks for themselves. At the peak of transmission in December, 8 in 10 schools didn't have an active case of COVID at all. So I'm not suggesting COVID doesn't exist in schools. It's reflected within our communities. I'm just simply saying we've done a pretty decent job. And by we, I mean our educators, our public health units, our nurses on the ground. They have worked hard with the partnership of parents to keep COVID from transmitting in schools. And we want to do that, which is why we've stepped up the screening, the testing, and obviously the masking requirements just to help mitigate the spread of COVID in our schools.
Indeed. I think everyone is doing their best to try to keep COVID at bay and reduce the spread. When you talk about the numbers, and one of the criticisms is the metrics and why the public hasn't had access to some of this information when evaluating what school boards are reopening. Why doesn't the public have access to that information?
Well, the Chief Medical Officer of Health and I have, both been consistent that the decision points to reopen schools is based on a downward trend of community transmission. We've seen youth mobility rates from the spike over the holidays come down quite dramatically. Mobility is down. And the fact is schools are really the first to reopen before businesses. I mean, we've made this a priority in the province of Ontario. We are the only province that I know of that every day reports COVID cases in schools and outbreaks. I have known of no province that is as transparent. We've done that from the beginning. Parents could check right now what schools in their communities may have a case, an outbreak, or a closure. We want parents to have that information, and we want you to know that every medical officer of health has signed off on the reopening. The chief medical officer of health has signed off. The best pediatric institutions have said, yes, we've got to get our kids back. And because of our collective sacrifice, Melanie, because everyone stayed home and did their part, the community numbers are down, and therefore it's safe to send schools back. But I will not hesitate to act if we see a difference in the trend and a risk profile. As I did in March, we were the first in Canada to close schools. We'll do it again. We don't want to. The program we put in place should avoid that, and the downward trend hopefully will prevent that. But I just want to be clear. We will do whatever it takes to keep kids safe. That is the bottom line. But if we keep numbers down and we continue to do our part as a society, parents at home, families, et cetera, I know we can do this successfully.
Minister, I know we've run out of time, but very quickly before you go, is March
Sure.
break in question?
Yeah, look, I'm going to follow the public health advice on this. I'm just being straight up with you. I've sought the opinion of the chief medical officer of health. If he believes and the health experts believe it is better to keep kids in school learning, then I will accept that advice. At the end of the day, folks should not be traveling during March break anyway. We want to keep people in this province and country. We see the new variants entering our country, and the Premier had to step up to create a stopgap so that we're testing passengers, foreign travelers at the airport when they land in this country, so that we actually know if they have COVID and if they have new variants. And we've catched literally 5 new variants at the border as a consequence of the program we unveiled. So people should not be traveling to the extent humanly possible. We're trying to avoid that. But the decision on March break will be based on that expert advice, and I hope to announce it next week.
Next week. Okay. Appreciate your time. That's Education Minister Stephen Lecce. Thank you.
Thank you.